Welcome to your lessons video. This video will help you understand better the use of if and when. Let's start. It's important to understand when you use if and when, you create sentences with the idea of action and consequence. But we know that depending on the action, we have different consequences. For example, we can have a certain consequence, and we can have a possible consequence, or even we can imagine consequences. So it's very important to use the correct structure to give the right idea. Let's see the first structure of the four we can use. The first structure we can use gives the idea that the action always has that consequence. It's very important, always, 100%. A good example is water. So let's see. If you freeze water, it becomes solid. Or when you freeze water, it becomes solid. The second example is if you heat water at 100 degrees, it becomes steam. Or when you heat water at 100 degrees, it becomes steam. Did you understand the times of the verbs? So let's see. The first, if you freeze, simple present. And the conclusion, it becomes simple present again. The second example was, if you heat, simple present. And the conclusion, it becomes simple present again. If you use the action in the present, and if you have a consequence also in the present, you give the idea that that action always creates that consequence. The second structure you can use is one that will give an action and a possible consequence, or a consequence that is in your opinion. A good example is to study. Listen to the example. If you study, you will have a good grade. Or to eat, for example. If you eat that, you will not like it. Did you understand the times of the verbs? Let's listen to the times. The first, study. If you study, simple present. You will have a good grade, future. Second example, to eat. If you eat that, simple present. You will not like it, future. When you use this structure of action in the simple present and the consequence in the future, you're giving the idea that that consequence is a very possible one, or that it's in your opinion. The final two examples are about consequences that are impossible to happen in the future. And there are two motives for that. The first one could be because that it already happened in the past differently. And the second motive could be because it's just your imagination. You're just imagining things. Let's see the first example with vacations. This year, I traveled to Argentina. But if I had gone to London, it would have been more expensive. Did you understand the times of verbs of this example? It's very important for you to use this structure only when you want to talk about things that could have been different if you'd done something different in the past. Let's listen to the example again. If I had traveled to Argentina, you use the past perfect. And in the conclusion, you use would have been more expensive. So you use the conditional would plus the present perfect. The final use of if are for actions and consequences that are just your imagination. So you're creating an imaginary consequence. A good example are nationalities. Let's listen to the example. If I was American, I would live in New York. Did you understand the time of verbs of that example? Let's listen again. If I was American, you use the verb in the simple past. I would live in New York. You continue to use the conditional clause would but you put the verb in the simple present. This final example will help you create sentences that will give the idea of what you are imagining at the moment.